My name is Kenneth Morgan, and my own daughter once looked me in the eyes and said, "Don't expect a penny of Mom's 56 million." She thought she had already won, that my place in her life was nothing but shame and absence. But when the will was finally read, the name that echoed in that mahogany room was mine, not hers. What followed shattered everything she believed about power, loyalty, and inheritance. I was no longer the broken man she thought I was. I was the one her mother trusted to carry the legacy she left behind. Yet what came after was not triumph alone, but a painful reckoning with the daughter who had humiliated me in front of hundreds. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories. I will never forget the sting of that morning when the lawyer's voice pierced my quiet kitchen. "Mr. Morgan, I'm afraid Isabella passed away 3 days ago." Those words left me hollow, yet before the grief could settle, another wound was waiting. At her funeral, in front of mourners dressed in black, my daughter looked at me as if I were filth. "Don't expect a penny of Mom's 56 million, she spat with a confidence sharpened over 10 years of bitterness. The venom in her tone wasn't just about money. It was a verdict against me as a father, a man she believed had abandoned her. The air inside the chapel was thick, mourners whispering as I approached Isabella's casket to pay my respects. My hand rested on the cold rim of polished metal, and for a fleeting moment I remembered the woman I had once loved, the dreams we once built. But then, like a shadow overtaking light, Brooke stepped forward. Her eyes gleamed with cruelty, as if this sacred moment were her stage. In a heartbeat, she extended her foot, and I felt the marble floor slam against my body. Gasps rippled through the room. 100 people, most of them. Isabella's business associates now stared at me, sprawled out like a fool, my umbrella clattering loudly in the silence. Phones lifted discreetly, recording my humiliation. My daughter stood tall above me, her voice carrying like a dagger. "Oops. How clumsy of you, Dad. Just like when you stumbled out of our lives." The laughter she forced through clenched teeth cut deeper than the scrape on my hands. My cheeks burned not from the fall, but from the reality that my own flesh and blood had orchestrated this spectacle. I pushed myself up, slowly, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. "I deserve that," I whispered, looking straight into her eyes. "But your mother deserved better than this circus." For just a second, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe even regret, but it vanished under layers of polished resentment. Around us, murmurs grew. Some guests frowned at her cruelty. Others shook their heads at me as if I had no right to be there at all. My daughter's victory seemed complete. Yet in that moment, a new presence shifted the air. Robert Sterling, the attorney whose call had shattered my morning, stepped into the aisle. His polished briefcase in hand, his tone professional but heavy with meaning. "Mr. Morgan, Miss Morgan, we need to discuss Isabella's will." The chapel hushed instantly. The word "will" lingered in the air like a thunderclap, cutting through the spectacle Brooke had staged. I caught the faintest crack in her mask of superiority, her lips parting in confusion. For the first time since I had arrived, it was no longer me on trial, it was her certainty. That was the moment the tide began to turn, though neither of us yet knew how violently it would change our lives. The chapel air felt colder after Sterling's words, though rain still tapped steadily against the tall, stained glass windows. My daughter's smug confidence wavered for the first time. She straightened her black dress and narrowed her eyes at me as if to reclaim control. "What will she?" demanded, her voice sharp enough to draw the attention of every guest. The attorney's expression remained carefully neutral. "Perhaps it's best discussed privately," he replied, "but the damage was already done." The murmurs around us swelled curious eyes flicking between me and Brooke, as if our family tragedy had become a spectacle. My daughter's jaw tightened, and she hissed through clenched teeth, "Don't get comfortable, Dad. Whatever Mom left, it's mine." I steadied myself, brushing the dirt from my trousers, refusing to rise to her bait. The humiliation of lying on that marble floor still burned in my chest, but something inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, Brooke wasn't as certain as she pretended to be. I caught the faintest tremor in her voice, a hairline crack in the armor she had worn for so long. As guests began filing out their heels, clicking across the polished floor, a funeral director stepped between us. "This is not the place," he said firmly, glancing toward the casket. His eyes softened when they met mine, but his warning was clear. Brooke turned away with a dismissive flick of her hand, whispering to a cluster of Isabella's colleagues, planting seeds of scorn against me. The isolation was familiar. For years I had been cast as the villain in my daughter's story, the father who walked away, the man unworthy of her respect. And yet, standing there under the heavy gaze of strangers, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Something Isabella had done, something she had written, was about to unravel Brooke's certainty. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing the cemetery paths into streams of mud. Sterling walked with me toward the parking lot, lowering his voice. "Mr. Morgan, Isabella named you specifically. Your presence tomorrow at 2 o'clock is not optional." The card he handed me felt heavier than paper, should the gold lettering glinting faintly beneath the gray sky. "What did she leave?" I asked quietly, almost dreading the answer. His lips pressed into a thin line. "It will be clear soon enough." From the corner of my eye, I saw Brooke step into a waiting sedan, her posture radiating smugness once again. She rolled down the tinted window just enough to smirk. "Enjoy your little fantasy, Dad. Tomorrow you'll watch me inherit everything. Maybe they'll let you keep the cheap suit you're wearing." The car door slammed, tires splashing through puddles, and she was gone. I stood in the rain, gripping that card as if it were an anchor in a storm. For 10 years, I had lived small, an apartment in Queens, a modest job, the quiet ache of estrangement. Tomorrow threatened to change all of that, whether for better or worse. I looked back at the chapel one last time. Isabella's casket was inside, silent, but I could almost hear her voice as clearly as I once had in the library at Boston University. "Kenneth, trust your foundation. The truth always finds its way." That night in my Queens apartment, the rain never seemed to stop. It pattered against the thin windows, as if echoing the storm in my chest. I sat at the small kitchen table, the lawyer's card resting in front of me like a silent threat. Isabella, after all those years of silence, after the bitterness of divorce, after raising Brooke in a world where I was nothing more than an afterthought, had called my name from beyond the grave. I couldn't fathom why. I pulled an old leather-bound album from the dusty shelf, one I hadn't touched in a decade. The pages crackled as I turned them. There she was, Isabella, 21 years old, sunlight catching her dark hair, laughing at something clumsy I must have said. Back then, she had been the brightest star in any room, brimming with ambition that felt larger than life. And me, I was the quiet one, the steady hand. We were mismatched in so many ways, yet for a while that imbalance created harmony. I remembered late nights in our first house, her bent over stacks of notes and flowcharts while I cooked dinner. I remembered her voice, excited and breathless, explaining how the internet would change the world when most people still thought it was a passing fad. And I remembered how fiercely I had believed in her working extra hours, giving up my own dreams so she could chase hers. But memory has a way of softening edges. What the photographs didn't show was the distance that grew like a crack in the foundation. By the time the financial crisis of 2008 crushed us, We were already two strangers in the same house. And when I found those emails, words of love not meant for me but for her business partner, I knew the bond we once had was gone. Divorce had been inevitable, but what hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing my daughter in the process. Brooke had chosen sides and the court had made it permanent. Weekends filled with awkward silences, birthdays spent with forced smiles, graduations where I stood in the back row, it all painted the same picture: Kenneth Morgan, the absent father. Her narrative became the truth she clung to, and no amount of sacrifice on my part could rewrite it. I stared at the faded photographs until my eyes blurred. Why now, Isabella? Why name me in your will after a decade of silence? Was it guilt? Was it revenge? Or was it something else entirely? Something I couldn't yet see. The clock ticked toward midnight, and exhaustion weighed down my bones. Yet beneath the grief and confusion, there was a pulse of something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. Tomorrow I would walk into that office, sit across from my daughter, and hear the words Isabella had left behind. Whatever awaited it would end the silence once and for all. As I closed the album and slid it back onto the shelf, I whispered into the quiet, Isabella, whatever you've planned, I'll face it. The morning of the will reading arrived with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I dressed carefully, choosing the same tie I had worn to Brooke's high school graduation, the last moment we had pretended to be a family. The silk was frayed at the edges now, but it carried a reminder of who I had once been, in her eyes, a father who mattered. As I knotted it in the mirror, I told myself this day would not be about appearances, but about truth. When I arrived at Sterling Hayes & Associates, the building itself seemed designed to intimidate. Glass walls rose into the Manhattan sky, and the marble lobby gleamed with the kind of wealth I had never touched. I signed in at the reception desk, my name sounding foreign even to me, as the attendant confirmed my appointment. A part of me still couldn't believe I had any place here. The conference room was on the 23rd floor, its walls lined with expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows offering sweeping views of the city Isabella had conquered. I took a seat at the long mahogany table, my palms damp against the polished surface. For a few minutes, I was alone with my thoughts. Then the door opened. Brooke swept in 5 minutes late, her heels striking the floor like a gavel announcing judgment. She wore a fitted black suit that probably cost more than my month's rent, her posture radiating control. Without so much as a glance at me, she took the chair across the table and folded her hands neatly in front of her. "Punctual as always, Dad," she said, her tone dry as ash. "Ready for your consolation prize." Before I could respond, the door opened again, and Robert Sterling entered, carrying a thick folder bound with legal tabs. His expression gave away nothing as he sat at the head of the table. "Thank you both for coming," he began, his voice calm and professional. "Isabella's will is comprehensive, and I ask that you hold questions until I finish reading." Brooke leaned back, her manicured nails tapping against the table as if she were already rehearsing her victory. I sat still, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every second of Sterling's legal preamble felt like a lifetime. The phrases sound: mind revocation of prior wills and executorial authority, washing over me like a tide I couldn't control. Finally, Sterling lifted his gaze and began. "To my beloved daughter, Brooke Morgan, I leave my apartment on Fifth Avenue, all personal effects contained therein, and the sum of $500,000. The tapping of Brooke's nails stopped. Her eyes widened, her carefully rehearsed smirk faltering. She blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Wait, what?" she interrupted, her voice sharp with panic. "That's it." But Sterling's voice continued, steadily moving toward the next clause. The room fell into a silence so heavy it was almost unbearable. I could feel the shift in power like a physical force pressing against the air. For the first time in years, my daughter was not in control, and she knew it. Sterling did not flinch at Brooks' interruption. His tone remained measured, his eyes fixed on the document as though her outrage were nothing more than background noise. To Kenneth Morgan, my former husband, he continued, I leave the remainder of my estate, including all business interests, real property investment accounts, and liquid assets totaling approximately $55.5 million. The word struck me like a thunderclap. For a moment I wondered if I had misheard. 55 million. The company Isabella had built from the ground up, the investments, the houses, all of it mine. My fingers curled against the polished wood of the table, my pulse roaring in my ears. Across from me, Brooks' face drained of color. Her mouth fell open, her eyes darting wildly between Sterling and me, searching for an explanation. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's impossible. She couldn't. Sterling cleared his throat and read on his voice, carrying the weight of Isabella's words. Kenneth, you were always my foundation. I failed you as a wife, but I never forgot your loyalty or the years you carried us through struggle. I entrust you with my life's work. Teach our daughter what I could not, that true worth comes from building, not inheriting. My breath caught. I could almost hear Isabella's voice in the room, softer now, stripped of ambition, laced with regret. She was speaking directly to me and to the daughter who sat glaring in stunned silence. Brooks' chair scraped loudly against the floor as she shot to her feet. This is fraudulent, she shouted, her composure shattering. He manipulated her. He must have blackmailed her before she died. Her accusations cracked through the air like lightning. Several assistants outside the conference room turned to look in their curiosity barely concealed. I forced myself to remain still, though my insides churned. Brooke, I said quietly, I had no idea about any of this. Liar, she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You abandoned us, and now you expect me to believe she rewarded you for it. No. This is mine. All of it is mine. Sterling remained calm, gathering his papers. Miss Morgan, your mother recorded her testament on video 3 months ago. It was notarized and witnessed. There is no question of validity. The silence that followed was unbearable. Brooks' breathing came in sharp bursts, her chest rising and falling as her entire world collapsed around her. She looked at me. Not as a daughter looks at her father, but as an enemy who had stolen everything she believed was hers. You'll regret this, she said finally, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Enjoy your moment, Dad. It won't last. I'll see you in court. She grabbed her purse, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door so hard the framed artwork rattled. Sterling exhaled slowly and closed the folder. Mr. Morgan, he said, his tone shifting to something almost sympathetic. This is only the beginning. And he was right. My humiliation at the funeral had been nothing compared to what was coming. The days following the will reading felt unreal, as if I had stumbled into someone else's life. My bank account, once a modest balance that barely stretched from paycheck to paycheck, now represented unimaginable wealth. Yet the numbers meant little compared to the responsibility that had been thrust upon me. Isabella hadn't just left me money. She had left me control of the company that had consumed her life and in many ways destroyed our marriage. I stood in the gleaming lobby of Chen Morgan Technologies for the first time 2 weeks later, my reflection fractured in the polished steel and glass. The receptionist greeted me with a cautious smile, her voice betraying recognition. Mr. Morgan, welcome. The executive team is expecting you. The words nearly made me stumble. For years, I had been the outsider, the forgotten ex-husband. Now I was walking into the empire Isabella had built with my name on the deed. Inside the headquarters buzzed with quiet efficiency. Dozens of employees moved through hallways with purpose, their badges flashing against their suits. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan's skyline, a view Isabella had once described to me in those early college days, when dreams were still fragile. Now here it was solid and breathtaking. Sarah Chen, the chief operating officer, met me at the entrance to the executive wing. She extended her hand firmly. "Mr. Morgan, I know this must feel overwhelming. Isabella spoke of you often, especially in her last months." Her words caught me off guard. She spoke of me, I asked. Sarah nodded. "She said you were the foundation that allowed her to dream. Without your sacrifices, this company wouldn't exist." For a moment, the noise of the office faded. My throat tightened. It had been years since anyone acknowledged what I had given, what I had lost. Isabella had never said those words to me directly, but knowing she had thought them even at the end felt like a weight lifting from my chest. Still, reality settled back quickly. Sarah led me into the boardroom where charts, financial reports, and projections covered the walls. "We have contracts with Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and universities across 3 continents," she explained. "Annual revenue exceeds $50 million. The growth trajectory is strong." Her tone was professional, but her eyes searched mine, measuring whether I could handle what Isabella had left behind. I listened, nodding, though the numbers spun in my head like a foreign language. I had managed small teams before, but this was an empire. Hundreds of employees depended on me now, not just for a paycheck, but for vision, stability, and leadership. Isabella had trusted me with all of it, as though she believed I could finish what she started. And yet, as I left that day, stepping into the brisk Manhattan air, a shadow followed me. I could feel Brooke's fury building like a storm. She hadn't accepted her mother's decision, not for a second. Her promise at the will reading echoed in my mind. "Enjoy your moment, Dad. It won't last." I knew then that her counterattack was coming, and it would be brutal. It didn't take long for Brooke's storm to break. Just a week after I first stepped foot into Chen Morgan Technologies, a courier knocked at my apartment door with a thick envelope. Inside were papers stamped with the seal of the Supreme Court of New York. My daughter had filed suit to contest the will. The words felt heavy in my hands: fraud, undue influence, manipulation of a dying woman. Each accusation was like a knife driven into my chest. I sank into my worn recliner, reading through the legal jargon. According to Brooke's attorneys, I had coerced Isabella into rewriting her will, exploiting her fragile health, and manipulating her guilt. They painted me as a schemer, a man who had abandoned his family, only to swoop in at the end to seize everything. The irony stung deeper than any insult ever could. For 10 years, I had lived small, absent from wealth or power. Now they claimed I was some kind of puppet master. I called Sterling immediately. His calm voice was steady. "We anticipated this, Mr. Morgan. Brooke is determined, but we have every safeguard on our side. Your ex-wife recorded her will on video. We have notarized documents and medical records proving her mental clarity. The case is strong." His reassurance didn't ease the ache in my chest. It wasn't just about money. It was about my daughter standing across a battlefield, aiming every weapon she had at me. I remembered holding her as a newborn, her tiny fists clutching my finger, Isabella whispering, "She's going to change the world." And now here she was, trying to tear mine apart. News spread quickly. Articles surfaced online: heiress challenges father in $56 million estate battle. Social media lit up with speculation, strangers debating whether I was a greedy ex-husband or a wronged man finally receiving recognition. My phone buzzed with numbers I didn't recognize, reporters, gossip columnists, vultures circling. I ignored them all. But the hardest part wasn't the press or the lawsuit. It was walking into the company headquarters, knowing whispers followed me. Employees glanced up from their desks, their eyes flicking between curiosity and concern. Some clearly sided with Brooke, who had been a familiar presence here shadowing her mother. To them, I was an outsider, a man who had abandoned the empire in its infancy and now returned to claim it. One evening after a board meeting, I sat alone in Isabella's old office. Her chair, her desk, her framed photo of Brooke at age 10 all remained as she had left them. My reflection stared back at me from the glass window, weary, older, uncertain. For years I had begged for scraps of my daughter's attention. Now she gave me nothing but venom. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was her weapon to erase me completely, to brand me as the fraud she had long believed me to be. I realized then that this battle would not be fought only in court. It would be fought in every room I entered, every headline written, every whisper behind closed doors. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the burn of something dangerous rising in me, not fear, but resolve. The first day in court arrived with the same dread I'd felt years earlier sitting in the family court that stripped me of time with my daughter. Back then, I'd walked away with nothing but weekend visits and a broken heart. Now I walked into a federal courtroom accused of manipulating the woman I once loved and betraying the daughter I still longed to protect. The room smelled of polished wood and cold air conditioning. Brooke was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table in a sharp navy suit, her lawyers flanking her like bodyguards. She didn't even glance my way. Her chin held high, her expression one of righteous fury. For a moment I saw not my daughter, but Isabella's ambition carved into flesh, unyielding, relentless, unwilling to bend. The judge entered a stern woman in her 60s who commanded silence without raising her voice. The clerk read out the case, Brooke Morgan versus Kenneth Morgan, contesting the last will and testament of Isabella Chen Morgan. My stomach twisted at the sound of those words. Brooke's lead attorney rose first. His voice carried a practiced indignation. Your Honor, this case is simple. Kenneth Morgan abandoned his family more than a decade ago. He reappeared only after Isabella's death when billions of dollars and a powerful company were at stake. We contend he manipulated a dying woman, exploiting her guilt and loneliness to seize control of her empire. He gestured toward me as though presenting evidence itself. We will show this was not Isabella's will, but Kenneth's ambition disguised as hers. The words stung. Abandoned, manipulated, exploited. Each accusation twisted the knife deeper. I wanted to shout, to tell the court about the nights I worked 3 jobs, while Isabella buried herself in her office, about the meals I left untouched, outside her door, about the daughter I'd lost. Not because I walked away, but because she pushed me out. But I stayed quiet. Sterling had warned me patience would be our weapon. Sterling rose calmly, his presence steady, unshaken. Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests on emotion, not fact. The truth is documented. Isabella Morgan recorded her will on video in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary. The recording shows her in full health, mentally sound, and resolute in her decision. Furthermore, medical records confirm her cognitive clarity until the day she passed. This was no act of manipulation. It was Isabella's will, her words, her choice. He opened a folder and placed photographs on the judge's bench. Isabella at her desk, signing papers with clear handwriting. Doctors' statements attesting to her health. The notarized seals that glimmered under the courtroom lights. The judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. We will hear the video testimony tomorrow, she said firmly. Until then, both sides are reminded that this case concerns facts, not grievances. As the gavel struck, Brooke finally turned to face me. Her eyes were not the eyes of a grieving daughter, but of a rival who believed she had been robbed. The hate there was almost unbearable. For years, she had called me absent. Now, for the first time, I understood she wanted me erased. The next morning, the courtroom was fuller than before. Reporters filled the back benches, their pens poised, waiting for a headline. I sat stiffly at the defense table, my palms pressed flat against the polished wood. Across the aisle, Brooke radiated confidence again, whispering with her attorneys, as though victory was already assured. But when the bailiff wheeled in a cart holding a television and a stack of files, the atmosphere shifted. This was the moment Sterling had promised me would silence doubt the video testament. The judge gave a curt nod. Proceed. Sterling stood his voice, calm and deliberate. Your Honor, we present Exhibit A, the final recorded statement of Isabella Chen Morgan, dated 3 months before her passing. The bailiff pressed play, and the screen flickered to life. There she was, Isabella. Not the weary woman I remembered in our final years, but composed, her dark hair neatly pinned, her eyes sharp and steady. She looked straight into the camera. My name is Isabella Chen Morgan, she began, her voice clear, her tone resolute. This is my last will and testament. I am of sound mind and body, making these decisions freely and without influence. I felt my throat tighten as her words filled the silent courtroom. She spoke with the same authority she had carried in boardrooms, yet there was something softer too, something personal. To my daughter Brooke, she continued, I leave my apartment on 5th Avenue and the sum of $500,000. Brooke, you are brilliant, but you have never known struggle. I pray this gift teaches you responsibility. A rustle went through the courtroom. Brooke's jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with rage. Then Isabella turned slightly, as if speaking directly to me across the years. To my former husband, Kenneth Morgan, I leave the remainder of my estate, including Chen Morgan Technologies. Kenneth, you were the foundation that allowed me to dream. I failed you in many ways, but I never forgot your sacrifices. I trust you to guide what I built, and I trust you to show Brooke what it means to earn. Her words hung heavy in the air, undeniable, unshakable. The video ended with her signing the document in front of witnesses, each seal clear, each step deliberate. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable. Sterling broke the silence. Your Honor, as you can see, this was no coerced decision. Isabella Morgan spoke plainly, clearly, and without hesitation. The law is clear. Brooke erupted, slamming her palm against the table. She was manipulated. You don't know how he worked her guilt, Miss Morgan, the judge's voice cracked like a whip. Control yourself. The gavel's echo lingered, but what struck hardest was the silence that followed. In that moment, I realized Isabella had done more than leave me her company. She had spoken for me when I no longer had the words to defend myself. For the first time, I felt the tide shift. The courtroom was still buzzing from the video when the judge lifted her hand for silence. Her gaze swept the room, firm and steady. We have seen clear evidence that Mrs. Morgan's will was drafted, witnessed, and notarized in full compliance with the law, she said. The video leaves no question of her intent. This court will now hear final arguments before rendering a decision. Brooke's attorney rose, his face tight with frustration. Your Honor, we acknowledge the video, but we contend Mrs. Morgan was under emotional duress. The presence of her ex-husband in her life even distantly weighed on her conscience. It is our belief she acted out of misplaced guilt, not free judgment. His voice strained, searching for traction. This distribution is unnatural. No mother would reduce her daughter to a token inheritance while enriching the man who abandoned her. I felt the sting of those words, even though I knew they weren't true. Abandoned, how easily that word became a weapon. Yet as I looked at Brooke sitting stiffly beside her lawyer, I saw not triumph, but desperation. She had gambled everything, her reputation, her inheritance, on convincing the world I was the villain. Sterling rose slowly, adjusting his glasses. His calm tone filled the room. "Your Honor, we must not confuse disappointment with injustice. Mrs. Morgan made a difficult choice, yes, but one that was entirely her own. She had full clarity of mind, as her medical records confirm. She recorded her wishes on video, anticipating this very challenge. If guilt guided her, it was not toward Mr. Morgan, but toward the sacrifices he made for years while building the foundation of her success. That acknowledgement is not coercion. It is truth." He stepped back, and the room grew still. The judge folded her hands, her expression solemn. "I have heard enough." Time slowed as she gathered her notes. My heart pounded, each beat echoing like a drum in my chest. Then, with a decisive tone, she delivered her ruling. "The petition to invalidate the will of Isabella Chen Morgan is hereby denied. This court recognizes the validity of the will in its entirety. Control of the estate and Chen Morgan Technologies is awarded to Kenneth Morgan." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. The gavel struck once, twice, sealing the decision with finality. I sat frozen, barely able to process the words. Around me, people shuffled, but my eyes stayed fixed on Brooke. Her face crumpled, the mask of polished certainty collapsing into raw disbelief. She whispered something to her lawyer, but he only shook his head, defeated. When the session adjourned, she stood abruptly, gathering her papers with trembling hands. As she passed me, she hissed under her breath, "This isn't over. You'll regret ever crossing me." Her heels clicked sharply against the marble as she stormed out, leaving the courtroom heavy with her fury. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Sterling leaned closer, his voice quiet but firm. "You've won, Mr. Morgan, but winning is only the beginning." He was right. The legal battle was over, but the war for my daughter's heart had only just begun. 2 weeks after the judge's ruling, I stood inside the top floor of Chen Morgan Technologies, staring out at the Manhattan skyline that Isabella had once dreamed of conquering. The city stretched endlessly, steel and glass glittering in the afternoon sun. It should have felt like victory, but the weight pressing on my shoulders reminded me this wasn't a prize. It was a responsibility. Hundreds of employees now looked to me for stability, leadership, and a future. Sarah Chen, the COO, walked into the office with a stack of reports. She placed them carefully on the desk, her expression professional but warm. "Mr. Morgan, the transition is moving forward. The management team is committed, but the staff is unsettled." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Brooke spent years shadowing Isabella. Many believed she would inherit leadership. Some employees are struggling with the court's decision. Her honesty cut deep. I knew the truth. My victory in court didn't erase years of Brooke's presence here. To many, I was an outsider, a man with a last name on paper, but no history in the trenches of this company. And Brooke wasn't fading quietly into the background. Rumors swirled that she had begun meeting with some of Isabella's old investors, whispering about a hostile takeover, painting me as an incompetent usurper. I leafed through the reports. Sarah had left quarterly earnings, projections, contracts with Fortune 500 clients. The numbers were staggering. Isabella had built an empire, and she had trusted me to continue it. My chest tightened at the thought. She had believed in me even when no one else did. I couldn't let her down. Yet beneath that determination, another thought gnawed at me, my daughter. Brooke's face as the judge denied her petition was seared into my memory. The fury, the humiliation, the betrayal. She hadn't just lost money. She had lost the narrative she had told herself for years, that she was Isabella's rightful heir, and I was nothing. Now stripped of her certainty, she would fight harder not for justice but for revenge. Late that evening, as the office lights dimmed and the city outside glowed with neon and headlights, I sat alone at Isabella's old desk. Her pen still rested in the holder, her handwriting still visible on a whiteboard filled with half-finished strategies. It was as if she had stepped out for a moment and might walk back in at any time. I touched the pen absently, wondering if she had known the chaos this decision would unleash. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Enjoying Mom's chair. Brooke's voice was sharp, venomous. It won't be yours for long. Investors are already calling me. They know you don't belong there. You were never her equal, Dad, and you never will be. Her words cut deeper than she realized. For years I had wrestled with that very fear that I wasn't enough, not for Isabella, not for Brooke. But as I hung up the phone, something inside me hardened. This was no longer just about inheritance. This was about proving to the company, to my daughter, and to myself that I belonged. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a battlefield disguised as a boardroom. Every day I arrived at Chen Morgan Technologies, there were whispers in the hallways, sidelong glances from employees, and subtle resistance from those who had once assumed Brooke would inherit the throne. On the surface, the company ran smoothly, but beneath it I could sense the fractures forming. Brooke was behind it. I could feel her hand in every rumor, every doubt. It didn't take long for confirmation. Sarah entered my office one morning with a newspaper folded tightly in her hands. "You should see this," she said quietly, laying it on my desk. The headline screamed back at me. Heiress Brooke Morgan claims father unfit to lead $55 million empire. My chest tightened as I read the article. Brooke had given an interview painting herself as the rightful heir and me as an intruder. She called me a man who abandoned his family, who has no experience in technology, and who intends to sell off the company for personal gain. I closed the paper slowly, the sting of her words cutting deeper than the printed ink. "She's turning the public against me," I murmured. Sarah nodded grimly. "Some investors are nervous. They've called asking whether the company will survive this family conflict." That afternoon, an emergency board meeting was convened. I walked into the mahogany-paneled room to find several members already agitated. One, a silver-haired man named Harrison, didn't waste time. "Kenneth, with respect, you're out of your depth. This company needs vision, not sentimentality. Brooke knows the systems, the clients. Why shouldn't she lead?" I kept my composure, though inside my heart pounded. "Because Isabella didn't choose her," I replied evenly. "She chose me, and she made that decision with clarity and purpose." "But can you lead us?" Harrison pressed. "You've never run a tech company. Investors don't care about sentiment. They care about results." I let the silence stretch before answering. "You're right. I'm not a software architect. I'm not an engineer. But I understand people and I understand responsibility. Isabella built this company on innovation and integrity. My role is to protect that, not dismantle it, not sell it, but protect it." Some heads nodded reluctantly, but I could tell others remained unconvinced. Brooke's shadow was everywhere, whispering doubts. That evening, I received an email from an anonymous address. Attached were scanned proposals Brooke had sent to certain investors, promising them generous stakes if they backed her in ousting me. The betrayal stung, but it also clarified the battlefield. This wasn't just resentment anymore. It was a campaign. As I stared at the glowing screen in the quiet of Isabella's office, a memory surfaced. Isabella in our early days, sketching business ideas on a napkin, telling me Kenneth's success isn't about brilliance alone. It's about who can hold steady when everything shakes. I realized then that Brooke wasn't trying to just take the company. She was trying to shake me until I fell apart. But she had underestimated one thing. After everything I had endured, I had learned how to stand steady even when the ground trembled beneath my feet. The shareholders' meeting was supposed to be routine, a quarterly update on contracts, revenue, and projections. But as I walked into the glass-walled conference hall, I felt the tension before a word was spoken. Cameras from business networks lined the back wall, reporters scribbling notes, their eyes fixed on me as though waiting for a stumble. At the long table, shareholders sat in tailored suits, faces drawn tight with concern. Sarah Chen stood at my side, her calm presence a lifeline. I adjusted my tie, forcing steady breaths, though my heart hammered in my chest. This was Brooke's stage. I could feel it. The meeting began formally, enough charts on growth updates on Fortune 500 contracts, expansion plans in Europe. But then a shareholder cleared his throat, his voice pointed. "Mr. Morgan, while we respect the court's decision, many here question your qualifications. Ms. Brooke Morgan has raised concerns that your leadership threatens the stability of this company." The air thickened. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Before I could answer, the back doors opened with deliberate force. Brooke strode in, dressed in a crimson suit that turned every head. She hadn't been invited, but no one stopped her. Her heels clicked like gunshots as she walked to the front. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said smoothly, her voice carrying across the room. "I apologize for the interruption, but you deserve the truth." Murmurs rippled as she faced the shareholders. "My mother built this company with her vision and my support. I was by her side in the trenches, in the late nights, in the deals that made Chen Morgan Technologies what it is today. And now my father, who abandoned us years ago, sits in her chair. A man with no background in technology, no history of innovation. Ask yourselves, is this truly what Isabella wanted? Or was it a mistake born of misplaced guilt?" A hush fell. Her words cut clean, echoing the doubts already simmering in the room. I felt the sting, but I forced myself to remain still. Then slowly, I rose from my chair. "You're right about one thing, Brooke," I said, my voice steady. "I wasn't here in this company's hallways. I didn't sit in on coding sessions or investor calls. But don't you dare say I wasn't there. I was there in the years when your mother had nothing but a dream. I was the one working 3 jobs while she fought to build this company. I was the one holding our family together when the world collapsed in 2008. Isabella remembered that, even if you don't." Gasps stirred among the shareholders. Reporters scribbled furiously. Brooke's lips tightened, but I pressed on. "Your mother didn't choose me out of guilt. She chose me because she knew I understood sacrifice. She trusted me not to squander this company or this legacy, and I won't. Because this isn't about me. It's about every employee, every client, every person depending on Chen Morgan Technologies to thrive." The room was silent for a beat. Then slowly, one shareholder began to nod. Another followed. Sarah's hand brushed my arm, grounding me. Brooke's eyes burned with fury. But I saw something else flicker there, if only for a moment, doubt. The smear campaign began quietly, like a rumor carried on the wind. At first it was just whispers among investors, questions about my financial history, speculation about my so-called abandonment of Brooke and Isabella. But within weeks, those whispers turned into headlines. I woke one morning to see my face plastered across a business blog, "Unqualified heir Kenneth Morgan's checkered past raises questions." The article painted me as a man who had failed at his own career, a washed-up ex-husband suddenly thrust into control of millions. It dredged up old court records from the divorce, spinning every detail to make me look like a coward who had walked away from his family. I knew immediately who was behind it. Brooke had found allies among the press, feeding them half-truths and twisted stories. She was clever. She never lied outright, but she knew exactly which wounds to expose, which narratives would stick. Calls poured in from journalists demanding comment. Employees whispered in the hallways again, wondering if the company would survive under a man tarred as incompetent. Even Sarah, usually steady, admitted, "This is serious. Perception matters as much as facts." Investors are nervous. One afternoon, while I was reviewing contracts in Isabella's office, Sarah walked in with a tablet. She hesitated before setting it on the desk. "You should see this." It was a video. Brooke seated in what looked like a private studio, speaking directly to the camera. "My mother was brilliant," she said, her tone perfectly measured. "She built this company with integrity. But in her final months, she was vulnerable. My father, who had been absent for years, took advantage of her guilt. This was not her decision. It was his manipulation." The video had already gone viral, shared across social media, picked up by major outlets. Comments poured in, some siding with her, others calling her spoiled. But the damage was done. My name was out there, smeared not just in corporate circles, but in public opinion. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of the city spilling through the window. I thought about calling Brooke, begging her to stop, but I knew it would be useless. She wasn't just angry, she was determined to destroy me. Instead, I called Sterling. His voice was calm as always. "Kenneth, this is exactly why Isabella recorded the video, Will. She knew Brooke would fight, and she prepared for it. Don't respond emotionally. We'll counter this with facts and patience." But patience was hard to cling to when the world seemed to tilt against me. The next day, a group of employees confronted me in the lobby, their questions sharp. "Is it true you left your family with nothing? Is the company going to be sold off? Should we start looking for other jobs?" Their fear was palpable. I took a deep breath and answered as steadily as I could. "No. This company is not being sold. Your jobs are safe. Isabella built this, and I will protect it. I can't erase the past, but I can honor her vision. That's my promise." Even as I spoke, I knew Brooke was out there planning her next strike, and the war between us was far from over. The crescendo of Brooke's campaign came at the company's annual gala, a black-tie event Isabella had founded to celebrate innovation and honor employees. For years, it had been her stage, a glittering night of recognition. This year, it was my trial by fire. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and murmured conversations. I stood near the entrance, my tuxedo stiff against my shoulders, scanning the sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Investors, executives, employees, all gathered, their eyes flicking toward me with curiosity, suspicion, or open doubt. Brooke was here too. She made sure of it. She arrived in a gown of deep emerald that turned heads, her entrance deliberate. Cameras flashed as she smiled for the press, every angle crafted for sympathy and power. Within minutes, she had surrounded herself with a cluster of executives, whispering, laughing lightly, casting glances in my direction. When it came time for the keynote, Sarah introduced me with grace, but I could feel the tension ripple through the crowd. I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hot on my face, and gripped the podium. My voice carried through the microphone, steady but edged with the weight of the moment. "Tonight we celebrate what Isabella built," I began. "A company born from vision, from sacrifice, from relentless belief in a better way to work. She didn't do it alone. She did it with teams who gave their energy, their talent, and their hearts. And it's my honor to continue that legacy with all of you. Polite applause followed, but it was subdued, restrained. And then from the back of the room, Brooke's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Why don't you tell them the truth?" Dad gasps, rippled through the crowd as she strode forward, her heels striking the floor like a drumbeat. A microphone appeared in her hand, clearly planned. She turned to the audience, her expression a mask of sorrow. "This company should be mine. I was at my mother's side. I worked with her. But my father, who abandoned us years ago, manipulated her into signing everything over to him. And now he stands here pretending he deserves it." The room erupted in whispers, some sympathetic, others doubtful. Cameras swung toward me, capturing every flicker of emotion. I could have stayed silent, let security escort her out. But something in me snapped. I would not be humiliated again, not tonight. I stepped forward, my voice steady but sharper now. "You're right, Brooke. You were by your mother's side. And you're smart, capable, and ambitious just like her. But you're wrong about one thing. She didn't choose me out of manipulation. She chose me because she knew sacrifice builds strength. She knew I would protect this company from greed, even if that greed came from her own bloodline." The room went silent. For a moment, even Brooke faltered, her mask slipping as her eyes flashed with anger. She turned sharply, storming out, as flashes from cameras followed her. The applause came slowly at first, then louder until the ballroom echoed with it. But I didn't feel triumph, only sorrow. Because while the company's faith was beginning to tilt toward me, my daughter's heart seemed further away than ever. The morning after the gala headlines blazed across every business site and social feed, heiress publicly confronts father at company gala. Kenneth Morgan holds his ground as Brooke storms out. The photographs told the story more brutally than words, me gripping the podium with grim determination. Brooke mid-stride, her expression twisted with fury. The world had watched our family fracture in real time. At the office, employees were buzzing. Some stopped me in the halls with cautious words of support. Others avoided my gaze, uncertain which Morgan they should believe in. Sarah called me into her office. "Kenneth," she said, her tone, "even you handled last night well. But Brooke isn't finished. She's reaching out to investors, offering them promises of higher returns if they back her. She's also talking to the press again. She won't stop until she breaks you or the company." I sank into the chair opposite her desk, the exhaustion pressing into my bones. "She's my daughter," I murmured. "I can't keep fighting her like an enemy." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes steady. "Then you need to decide, Kenneth. Are you protecting Brooke from herself, or are you protecting Isabella's legacy from Brooke? Because you can't do both." Her words haunted me the rest of the day. I threw myself into the work, reviewing contracts, meeting department heads, walking through the offices to assure employees we were stable. Yet no matter how much I tried to focus, the ache of fatherhood gnawed at me. Every headline, every whisper in the halls, every rumor about Brooke's plotting felt like a knife twist. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, I returned to Isabella's office. The city glowed beneath me, alive and indifferent to my turmoil. On her desk still sat a box of her personal belongings. The company hadn't cleared pens, notebooks, a framed photo of Brooke as a child. I picked it up, tracing the glass with my thumb. A little girl in pigtails laughing as she held a balloon at her 5th birthday. I could still hear her voice in that memory, "Daddy, don't let go." Now she was doing everything in her power to push me away. The phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the silence. An email from Sterling lit up the screen. "Urgent, Brooke's attorneys have filed a new motion. They are requesting an injunction to block your operational control of the company pending further litigation." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Another lawsuit. Another attempt to drag my name through the mud. This wasn't just rebellion, it was war. I knew what was coming. Brooke's final push, the strike meant to topple me once and for all. The gala had been her public humiliation, and she would not forgive it. I set the photo of young Brooke back on the desk and whispered to the empty office, "I won't let you destroy yourself or everything your mother built. Not this time." The line had been drawn, and the next battle would be the most brutal yet. The injunction hearing was scheduled within days, a sign of how aggressively Brooke's attorneys were pushing. The courthouse steps were swarmed with cameras when I arrived, their lenses clicking like a storm of judgment. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Morgan, did you manipulate your ex-wife? Are you prepared to lose control of the company? What do you say to Brooke's accusations?" I kept my head down, Sterling at my side, his steady presence reminding me to stay silent. Inside the courtroom was tense, the air heavy with expectation. Brooke sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculate in a charcoal gray suit, her chin raised as if she were already victorious. She glanced at me only once, her eyes sharp and cold, then turned away as if I were a stranger. Her lead attorney launched into a polished speech. "Your Honor, this case is not about greed. It is about justice. My client's mother built this company with her daughter by her side. Yet somehow, in her final days, control was transferred to a man with no involvement in its creation, no knowledge of its operations, and a history of abandonment. We contend Kenneth Morgan exploited Isabella's vulnerability to secure control of Chen Morgan Technologies. Until this matter is fully litigated, we ask the court to suspend his authority, preventing irreparable harm to the company." The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were the exact narrative Brooke had been crafting in headlines and interviews. Sterling rose slowly, his voice calm but unyielding. "Your Honor, the petitioner misrepresents the facts. Isabella Morgan recorded her will and video testimony fully lucid with witnesses and notarization. She explicitly stated her reasoning. She left her daughter a significant sum but entrusted the company and remaining estate to Kenneth. This was not manipulation. It was her clear intent." He paused, then added, "To grant this injunction would be to overturn the will of a woman who foresaw this very challenge and prepared for it." The judge, a woman with stern eyes and a reputation for cutting through theatrics, leaned forward. "I have reviewed the video testimony and accompanying documents." Mrs. Morgan's words were deliberate and unambiguous. Unless the petitioner can produce new evidence, this court sees no grounds to suspend Mr. Morgan's authority. Brooke shot to her feet, her voice cracking despite her attempt at control. She was manipulated. He abandoned us, and now he's stealing what's mine. The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Sit down, Miss Morgan. This is not a stage for grievances. It is a court of law." The room went silent except for the scribbling of reporters' pens. The motion was denied. Sterling placed a reassuring hand on my arm, but I felt no victory. Brooke's face, pale with fury, burned into me. She stormed past as the session ended, her whisper aimed like a dagger. "This isn't over, Dad. I'll destroy you in the court of public opinion if I can't do it here." Walking out past the cameras, I realized the legal battle might be ending, but the war of reputation had just begun. And in that arena, the truth would need more than evidence, it would need resilience. If the courtrooms had been Brooke's battleground, the media became her weapon of mass destruction. Within days of losing the injunction, she launched a barrage of interviews, podcasts, and social media appearances. Everywhere I turned, my name was dragged through the mud. Deadbeat dad inherits $55 million empire. Unqualified ex-husband hijacks tech company. Heiress Brooke Morgan denied what she deserves. The worst came when an old photograph surfaced me leaving our Westchester house years ago, cardboard boxes stacked in my arms, rain pouring down. Brooke's allies in the press framed it as the night Kenneth walked out on his family. They ignored the truth that the divorce had already been decided, that Isabella had moved on, that Brooke herself had refused to be home that day. To the world I became a coward, a man who abandoned his wife and daughter, and now profited from their pain. The effect on the company was immediate. Clients called Sarah with concerns, employees whispered in hallways, a junior developer even asked me outright, "Mr. Morgan, are we safe? Or is all this just going to collapse around us?" His eyes weren't accusatory, they were frightened, and that was worse. One evening, exhausted from the onslaught, I sat alone in Isabella's office, scrolling through the hateful headlines. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Dad," the voice was smaller than I remembered, stripped of arrogance. "Brooke." For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then her tone hardened. "You think you've won, but you don't know the half of it. People believe me. They always will. You're just the villain in Mom's story, and I'll make sure they never see you any other way." I swallowed hard, choosing my words carefully. "Brooke, this isn't a game. You're burning bridges you can't rebuild. Every word you say damages not just me, but the company your mother built. Do you really want to destroy her legacy out of spite?" She laughed bitterly. "Don't talk to me about Mom's legacy. She wanted me to lead. You stole that from me. I'll scorch the earth before I let you wear her crown." The line went dead. I sat in the silence, the weight of her words heavy in the room. For the first time, I wondered if I was truly losing her. Not just to anger, but to hatred so deep it couldn't be undone. And then unexpectedly, help came from a place I hadn't anticipated. Sarah knocked softly before stepping in. She carried a folder, her expression serious. "I think it's time you saw this," she said. Inside were records, donations. Isabella had made mentorship programs. She'd started scholarships she had personally funded. "Your ex-wife built this company for more than profit," Sarah explained. "She built it to change lives. That's what you need to show people. Not the feud, not the inheritance, the mission." Her words struck something deep in me. Brooke wanted to win through destruction. Maybe my path was to win through purpose. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. I couldn't silence Brooke's rage, but I could remind the world who Isabella truly was and why her trust in me mattered. The turning point came not in a courtroom, but on a stage Isabella herself had once commanded. With Sarah's guidance, I agreed to speak at a technology conference where Chen Morgan Technologies was set to showcase its latest software. Normally, it would have been a straightforward presentation, but now it became my chance to reclaim the narrative Brooke had twisted against me. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Cameras lined the aisles, reporters eager to catch a stumble to write another headline about the unqualified heir. I walked onto the stage, my palms damp but my heart steady. Behind me, the massive screen displayed Isabella's name, her company's logo glowing bright. I began quietly. "My name is Kenneth Morgan. Some of you know me as the man who recently inherited this company. Others know me as the villain in a story that's been told too many times in the press. But tonight I want to tell you another story, the one Isabella believed in." The room hushed. I spoke of our college years when Isabella dreamed of a world where businesses could work together no matter where people lived. I told them about our kitchen table covered in charts and sketches, the sacrifices we both made when the company was only an idea, and the long nights I worked double shifts so she could keep coding. I didn't sugarcoat our failures, how the financial crisis nearly broke us, how our marriage didn't survive. But I emphasized the truth. Even when we failed each other, we never stopped believing in what this company could mean to the world. Then I shifted. You've seen the headlines. You've heard accusations. But Isabella left a message not for lawyers or judges, but for her daughter and for all of you. She asked me to continue this work because she believed in what sacrifice builds. And she asked me to teach our daughter that legacy is not something you inherit, it's something you earn. I clicked the remote, and the screen behind me changed to video clips Sarah had compiled scholarship recipients who credited Isabella's foundation for their education employees, who spoke about her generosity families who benefited from the company's profit-sharing program. Faces filled the screen, real people whose lives had been changed by Isabella's vision. This, I said, my voice catching, is the true inheritance. Not millions in a bank account, but impact that lasts beyond us. The audience erupted in applause, not polite, but genuine. For the first time since Isabella's death, I felt the tide shift. The press, who had painted me as a fraud, now scribbled new notes, cameras capturing the standing ovation. Backstage, Sarah gripped my hand firmly. "You did it," she whispered. "You reminded them of who Isabella was and why she trusted you." But even as I basked in that moment, I knew Brooke wouldn't see it as inspiration. She would see it as a direct challenge. And if I knew my daughter, her final strike was already forming. The applause from the conference still echoed in my ears when the final blow came. 3 nights later, I was in Isabella's office reviewing contracts when Sterling called. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Kenneth, brace yourself. Brooke has gone public with confidential company documents. She's claiming you plan to liquidate assets and dismantle the company." My chest tightened. That's absurd. I know Sterling cut in. But perception spreads faster than truth. She leaked partial documents stripped of context. It looks like you're selling off pieces of Chen Morgan Technologies to pad your pockets. I sank into Isabella's chair, staring at the skyline as panic pulsed through me. If investors believed the lie, the company could collapse overnight. Hundreds of employees, their livelihoods would vanish, all because Brooke wanted to see me ruined. The next morning, the news cycle was relentless. Heiress exposes father's plan to gut company. Analysts speculated live on television. Stock prices wavered. Employees flooded Sarah's inbox with fearful messages. Brooke had delivered her most dangerous strike yet. Sarah burst into my office with a file. "We can fight this, Kenneth." The documents she leaked, they were preliminary drafts Isabella reviewed years ago, never executed. We have the originals with notations in her handwriting. She placed them in front of me, the familiar script, unmistakable. "Draft only discarded." Isabella had written it in bold across the top. That evening, Sterling arranged a press conference. The auditorium was packed with reporters, their faces hungry for blood. I stepped to the podium, the weight of the company and Isabella's legacy on my shoulders. "You've heard accusations," I began, holding up Brooke's leaked pages. "But what you haven't seen is the truth." I laid the originals on the projector. The screen behind me lit up with Isabella's handwriting, clear and final. These were drafts, ideas considered and discarded. My ex-wife was meticulous, and she left no ambiguity. Gasps rippled as the notations came into focus. Reporters leaned forward, capturing every word. "This company is not for sale," I said firmly. "Chen Morgan Technologies is not being dismantled. It is being strengthened, and I will honor Isabella's mission exactly as she intended." The room filled with flashes of cameras. Questions flew, but I held steady. I cannot control the anger of my daughter. I can only control my actions, and my action is this: to protect the legacy of a woman who built something extraordinary, and to protect the people who give this company life every single day. By the time I left the stage, the stock had begun to recover. Investors called Sarah, expressing relief. The truth had landed. But the image that stayed with me wasn't the relieved faces of employees or the shifting numbers on the stock ticker. It was Brooke watching from the back of the room. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, her armor finally cracked. For the first time, she looked not like an heiress or a rival, but like a lost child who realized her war had cost her more than she could afford. When the battles finally quieted, I found myself alone in Isabella's office one last time, looking out over the city she had loved. The lawsuits were over. The smear campaigns had lost their sting. Chen Morgan Technologies stood firm, stronger, even not because of me alone, but because of the people who believed in its mission. Yet victory didn't taste like triumph. It carried the bitter weight of what I had lost and the fragile hope of what might still be mended. Brooke eventually stopped her attacks, though silence replaced the fire. I understood that silence. It was the same distance Isabella and I once lived with, the kind that erodes trust slowly, year after year. I couldn't force Brooke to change. All I could do was leave the door open for her to find her way back. What I learned through all this is simple: inheritance is not measured in dollars, but in lessons. Isabella left me more than money or a company. She left me the responsibility to show our daughter that true worth comes from building, not taking. And maybe that lesson is for all of us. Parents, children, families, betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't have to define us. Have you ever faced a moment where family turned against you and you had to decide between bitterness and strength? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to hear it. If this story spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked for more stories that reveal truth beneath the surface. Thank you for listening.